Hey everyone, welcome back for lesson 4. So we've got this great platformer that we put together last time, and what we're going to do is basically just extend this thing outward. So one thing that you want to notice here is the whatever we called the scene. That's going to be very important. I called mine main scene. We didn't cover that in previous video. I know you saved it as something, so make sure you make note of what's there. Then we're going to have to make an important change here because what we're going to do is add more scenes. So let's go to our code, and wherever you have the load scene, you have it as 0. Let's change that to load whatever the name of your scene is. So mine will be main scene. If yours is something else, go ahead and call it something else, and make sure that you name it whatever you named it in your Unity window there, and it's case sensitive, so be careful with that. Okay, let's save that and test it here to make sure that it works if we load by scene name. Still got that loud music, but okay, that worked. And if I hit R, or wait, if I die is the other way. Oof, that worked too. Okay, so we're all right on that front. All right, so now what we're going to do is go ahead and make a folder here for scenes because we're going to add more scenes. So we'll go create folder, call it scenes, and we can just drag that right into there for convenience. All right, and what we're going to do here is we're going to add a new scene at this point. So this is our platformer scene, and we can add a new one. So in this new scene, it just automatically opens up here. All right, let's hit Control S and save this scene. We can save it in our scenes folder, and we'll call it main menu. So now we're in this other scene. You can load from scene to scene here. If I double click main scene here, it loads that. If I double click main menu, it loads that one. All right, so that's all set. What we want to do here is create a game manager object that's going to handle what happens during different stuff in the game. So that's called a game manager or a GM. We can just right click here and make an empty game object and call it GM. A GM is not a particular thing in Unity. It's sort of a default object that we control the parameters of. So I'll just call it GM there, capital G, capital M, and then let's go back to our assets window here. What I want to do is add a script to this GM, and I'll call that script Game Manager. Capital G, capital M, Game Manager. Right. So that's created here, and you'll notice that this script gets sort of a funny icon. That's because the Game Manager is so commonly used in Unity that they want to call special attention to it. So let's drag that into our scripts folder. That's our Game Manager script, and it doesn't do anything yet. It's at the default here, as you can see, but it does sort of stand out amongst the other scripts because Game Manager scripts are really important. It's where you typically handle things like lives. A lot of the sound management tends to go there, things like that. We put everything on the player because we didn't really need a GM for a simple platformer scene, but we are going to add some stuff to our GM here in the main menu. So what we want to do here is make a clickable button that's going to load the platformer scene for us. So let's go game object and UI, and we are going to add a button right there. Right. And this goes back to the UI setup here. So let's click our game tab and we can see where that button actually is. It's actually not on my screen, so let's zoom way out, or maybe double click on the canvas so that we can, okay, let's drag this button here somewhere a little. Nice thing is you can see where it's sort of centered. So let's add it there, and now you can see it. Hey, we have a button. And if you hit play, this button is actually clickable, although it doesn't do anything yet. Okay? So that's how you can add a button to your scene. Now let's control what it actually does. There's a whole lot going on over here in the inspector with the button selected, and furthermore, the text is actually a different object that's a child of the button. So let's change that first. Select the text. You might have to expand the button here. And instead of it being called button, you want to change it to platformer game. Oops. Okay. So now we can see that in our scene. It says platformer game. Great. Okay. So now what we want to do is go to our GM, and we're going to want to open up that script. You can double click it from here, reload. Okay. So something a button can do is call a separate method from any script. All right. So what we want to do is let's add the scene management library here because we are going to be loading a scene. Scene management. Okay. And then we want to have a method to load the platformer. This is going to be a really simple method. It's just going to be the same line of code we wrote before about, loading the platformer scene. But it does need to have its own method in this game manager. So void load platformer. We'll keep it simple. And it's going to be scene manager dot load scene. And we called it main scene. I wish I'd called it platformer, but I didn't. And that's okay. We'll just call that the main scene of our game. Okay, save that, and then we have to do some setup with our button back in Unity. So here in Unity, select your button. And what we want to say is this on click here. Oh, you know what? One change. We might need to make that method public. Sorry, go back to your script. Let's make it public. There we go. That way it'll show up in Unity the way we need it to. So with this button selected, on click controls what happens when the button is clicked. In other words, what method runs. So anything that you want to have happen in your game, you want to be here in a method that you call from on click. This other stuff is all about how the button looks, how the button operates, when it's clickable, all that stuff. So let's add that. And what we want to say is runtime only, and it needs an object that that script is referring to. That would be our game manager, our GM. Okay, so find that. It's in the scene. Oops, the GM is here. You can click it there, or you could just drag it over. Any object reference can go that way. And runtime only, when it's running and we click it, we go to our game manager script, and we find that method that we wrote, load platformer it was called, right there, and we set that. All right, so now if I hit play, here's my main menu. I click that button, it runs that method, and guess what? I'm in that other scene now. Pretty cool, right? So this is a pretty simple approach to, wait, I want to shoot some fireballs. Loading here, clicking that. I feel better now, thank you. Okay, so that is a very simple use of a button. Now you can have that method do anything. These buttons aren't just for loading scenes. It's all about what code you wrote there. So the button runs a method essentially. That's why it's really nice to have a game manager object, because that's sort of controlling all of this stuff. So let's go ahead and add a second button here, and we'll add a quit button and put toward the bottom here because that's something everybody needs. And we can go ahead and add a title at the top so that our menu looks a little more impressive than what we currently have. We can also adjust the camera so that we have a different background here. We can change the color, or we can add a picture for our background. So we're going to go once again, game object, UI, button, and let's add that, and we want to center that and put it down here-ish so that we can add more in the middle if we want to later, but these are easily readjustable. And we will open up the text on that and we'll call it quit. Okay, and let's go back to our game manager script, and we'll say public void quit. Oops, that's not what I wanted. It auto-filled for me when I did that, so be careful about that. Rather have some extra autofill than no autofill, though, that's for sure. And then the command we want to quit the game when this is clicked is just application.quit. Pretty simple stuff. Save that, go back. And we're actually not going to see this do anything in the editor. We're going to need to make a build for quit to work because we're not in an application here in the editor. But let's rig it up so that this works. On click, I didn't make it public, did I? Oh, I did, good. I was worried there for a second. Okay, so we'll add a behavior here. We can drag the game manager over because that's the object we want to draw from. And on game manager, we'll say quit. Okay, So we won't see that do anything, but we know that it works, and when we make a build, we can actually see that happening. Let's also add some text at the top here. Game object UI text, move it up toward the top. Remember that we want to change the horizontal overflow and the vertical overflow to overflow in both cases, which in my opinion should be the default, but what are you going to do? It's not going to show up super well on that black screen. It's just not big enough. So a lot of times when you're changing UI elements, you want to do it in game view rather than scene view because it's easier to see on what the player actually is going to be looking at. So we have that. Let's give it that font that we have there, which is at the default level in our assets window. Maybe this time, since I'm not going to have a number here, maybe this time I can use that other font that was extra last time. If you want to use a different font, that's fine. So we have that. See, that looks better. Just don't use any numbers or they don't exist. Okay, I want to probably adjust the position of that, so I can do that here. You can just click and drag the name of this thing, and then you want to give it something other than what it says there. So let's say Mr. Sanborn's, that's not showing up very well. We can center this thing. So let's center align that. And then that. Mr. Sanborn's game. That's way too big. Let's just keep it on one line and shrink it down. Okay. I bet this doesn't have any exclamation points either. Well, okay, let's go with the goofy exclamation point. I like that because it has the sort of 1 and 0 look to it, which kind of reminds me of a different tangent, but for the sake of the video, I won't talk about that here. That's more of an in-class comment. Okay, we move that down. And you can just line it up however you like it. If we want to change the color here of this background, that's on our camera, actually. It's right here, background color. And we can change it to something maybe a little more visible. Actually, I don't hate that at all. Let me give it a little brightness. Not bad. I don't hate it. Okay. That's fine with me. And of course, you can change the color of your text to be something a little bit different if you're so inclined. You might want to name this something other than text. We might want to call that title text or something to that effect. But if not, that's okay. The better organization you have, I think the better off you are in general. Okay, so we have this, we've got the platformer game, we have the quit button. I think it's probably a good opportunity to add in a simple animation here to our main menu and maybe have a button that can change that. All right, I think that's probably a good final thing to do here for today. We'll keep it a simple, short lesson. So let's use the images we already have. We have this great sprite sheet. And let's drag one of those things. It's already split, so we'll just go with that. We'll use this frontal animation here. Oops, we're in scene view, so we can't see anything. We have this thing here. And again, we can't really see it because it comes in as a sprite. So let's go down to our sort of window here. And let's add this in. It's actually not the worst thing in the world, is it? We're treating it like an image, but it's actually a sprite. So we can get this. Whoops! Oh, that was way too big. Okay, we'll get that where we want it. Okay, and so we'll call this character. I'll probably shrink it down just a little bit. We don't want it to be quite that big. So let's go to our scene view, shrink it down a bit. Okay, I feel like next time maybe we can do something a little more interesting with this, but if we just add an animation to it, the default one like before, we'll just drag it. Select those 4 things using either shift and click or control and click and drag them onto our object here. And that's our new animation, so we'll call that sort of default. Okay, and then that opens up our animator window. Again, if you don't have that, it's under the window menu. Animator is the one you want, and our default menu animation is there. We're probably going to need to slow it down, I expect, but oh yeah, He's he's raring to go. Okay, let's slow him down to like a 0.25. And we can kind of see what that looks like. Okay. Getting some sort of weird visual here, and it has to do with how we slice the thing, but can't really be helped right now, so I'll just leave it there as it is. Okay. So this is the guy who represents sort of our character in the game, and it kind of gives continuity between scenes, which is actually pretty neat. Let's add another button, and we will make a button that's going to sort of change that animation there. So that gives us a chance to look at animation states and changing that from another button. So let's go game object, UI, and button. We'll put that one right in the middle for now. We can add more later if we need. And we'll call the text on that one, I don't know, animate, something like that. Okay, and we want to create another method in our GM script. So I'll say public void animate, and we'll go through some different animation states here. Okay. For this, we're going to need to add a reference to the animator. So we're going to go ahead and add a component right on the game manager, I suppose. Well, the game manager is not being animated. We probably don't want to do that. Let's add a different script actually, and let's add it to our player object here. So called character. Let's this time add a script to that thing. Let's call it animate script. And we'll just put the method in there instead. I think it just fits better there because it's not really anything to do with the game manager, you know? So let's move that into our scripts folder just to keep organized here. And then we'll open our animate script. And this time we'll say animator anim, and we'll set up that reference with get component, a very common method that you're hopefully starting to recognize by now. Okay, and then here let's just add a method and we're actually going to keep this really simple. We're going to set a component in the animator. So it's going to be public void animate. And what we want to do in this, I guess I can't call it animate. Yeah. Oh, it's the name of the script. That's treating. Okay. Animate guy. There we go. Whatever you want to call it is fine. Any relevant name is a good idea, but we'll keep it simple here. So what we want to do is advance the animation state. And to do that, we need to go set up our animator. So let's save that there for now. Go over to our animator. And we need a couple more states to go to. So let's add those to our character here. So what we want to do is go to our animation stuff. Let's select the next four so that we can create another animation state here. So select your frames that you want to use, drag them onto your character, and let's say back, and then we can make one for left by repeating that process. We can make one for right. So now we've got sort of 3 animation states that we can go through in this scene. There they all are. That's handy, right? Back, left, and right, all attached to this character. So let's sort of make this state machine cycle between these things, okay? So what we want to do is create a parameter here, and let's make it a trigger so that the parameter gets triggered whenever it's like clicking a button, which is appropriate because we're actually going to be clicking a button. So I'll just call that click. And we want to make, so right click this default state, make a transition to back. So when they click it once, we'll go to back, and then make a transition here and click this one. and then this one, and we'll make this sort of square state machine. So when we click animate, we'll cycle between these states in this order. And then on these arrows, we just need to select hit the plus here to select our condition, and the only condition we have is clicking, so that's the one. We do that for all of these. Oops. If you had one too many, you can delete it using the minus. There we go. There we are, and there we are. Okay. So for each of these things, we also should set the speed to 0.25 or whatever you set yours to, just so that we're consistent. So change your animation states there. One thing we want to be aware of in these transitions is we don't really want a delay on this thing. We want it to switch to the next state immediately. So this is a setting that I find myself editing all the time. We want to change our exit time to 0 and our transition duration to 0. Okay, that way it's immediately going to go to that next state. That's pretty normal with a 2D animation. With something longer in a 3D game or in a game where you want the animations to be a little more realistic and a little less sprite based, then you might want some kind of transition time so it looks like your character is sort of moving more smoothly from state to state. But that's more advanced animation stuff and stuff that we're not going to worry about. So my exit time and my transition durations are 0. Now that we have that, we can go back to our script, remembering that this is called click, and we will say, when animate guy gets called, we'll just do anim.setTrigger, and the name of that trigger is click. Okay, so we save that, and then we rig up that button to select that method, essentially. So let's go back to our button here, that one that's called animate, and we want to add what happens on click. We want to, this time we're not going to call from the GM, we're going to call from the character. So let's drag that in there, and let's go on my animate script. We're going to do my animate guy method. Okay, so when that button gets clicked, it's going to call that method, which is in turn going to set the trigger, which is going to advance the animation state. So let's put that all together and see how it goes. I still had kind of a delay there, which I don't love, but it is working. It's going in order when I click it from state to state. Basically, it's finishing the animation before it goes to the next state, which isn't optimal, and it's something we can adjust, but that's one way that you can go from state to state in my animator. Okay? And then we could see him in action there in my game. Oof. And yeah, that's good enough for today. Just to recap, we have worked buttons into our game here. We have worked additional scenes into our game, and we've looked a little bit at the animator. And hopefully that sort of triggers your animation to see some of the stuff that you can do that makes your game a little bit more creative and adds some more dimension to it. All right, have a good day, and we'll see you next time.